to put that aina back into kind of the former space that it was. Long story short, we don't have the OI coming from the top of the property, so we had to figure out something else. We couldn't do loikalo, and we found agroforestry, and so that's what we're doing today. Our focus is native crops and Polynesian canoe crops, and we're doing so in the agroforest. And then March 2020 happened. You guys might remember, and I'm sure it made big changes for you guys. It was the start of the pandemic. And my husband and I both found ourselves unemployed, and that was another big turning point for us. We decided that instead of kind of trying to scramble back and figure out how to get back to our old careers, we were going to try give this farming thing a real go. And so we started full-time just working on the business. And previous to that, we had been selling our fresh produce at farmers markets, just whenever we could, wherever we could, and that was not really. It was hard to see how that was going to sustain us as now a business, because previously we were relying on our careers, right? And what we were doing on the aina was sort of we didn't rely on that, right? But now we were, and so that led us to really wanting to own the infrastructure, right? Own the business infrastructure and be vertically integrated. So we decided we were going to be the farmers, which I can feel how tired I am now. Maybe that wasn't, it's good to be naive, I guess. So we decided we were going to be the farmers, we were going to be the manufacturers, and we would sell the products too. And so that's what we're doing. We're vertically integrated, and we currently have, so we're focusing on packaged products. We want to take those harvests, minimally process them, and then get them out in convenient packaged form to the community. So accessibility is a big thing for us. And we currently have a few products. We have a mamaki and ulu tea blend. We have dried bananas. We have uhaloa, and we're working on some other things as well. And right now we're going through a big growth spurt in our farm and our business, and we're building an on-farm food processing hub. Again, another type of infrastructure. And so that is, that is a process that we've started, and hopefully, well, I don't want to give a date because we all know how construction goes, but that is an active project. And so I guess my point with bringing up the food hub and infrastructure, and I wanted to just kind of explain how ours works, because I think some people have different ideas of what a food hub is. Our idea is to aggregate food from people doing the same kind of things as us, growing these important cultural plants, doing so in a regenerative way that respects the aina. And so this infrastructure is not going to benefit us alone, right? It's going to strengthen the resilience of our business, but it's going to also give us the ability to promote the kind of businesses and the kind of farming and the kind of foods that we want to see coming out of this aina on Maui. And so it's kind of the idea of like, you're not going it alone, that this really is a kako effort, that this idea of a self-made person is just BS. That is not how our kupuna thought. That is not the mindset. And so that's kind of our story. And with there's another sort of coalition or network that's growing that I wanted to share. Oh, okay. Never mind, I'll share it at the next round.
Aloha, my name's Tina Grandinetti. I actually, I'm in between jobs right now. I spent the last 3 years at the state legislature working for Representative Amy Pruso, who's the rep for Waihoa. My last day was last week, and in September I start as a postdoctoral research fellow at Policy Link, working on their housing futures and land justice team. And my sort of passion in the realm of policy is around housing justice and our housing crisis here in Hawaii. And I think that the reason I feel so passionate about it is because I mean, all of us, if you grew up in Hawaii, you have people you've loved who've had to move away. You've had places you've loved that have been like rapidly and like unrecognizably transformed by gentrification and redevelopment. And so it's something like that we've all experienced on an intimate level. So I started out like kind of like delving into this issue after or during my PhD, and my research was sort of looking at Kūkākūkūā and the way that it was transformed by, you know, capitalism, capitalist urban development, and a handful of large corporations. And during my research, I was thinking through the ways that that private property is experienced as like a violent force by Kanaka and by working class people here in Hawaii. And I spent a lot of time doing field work with the houseless encampment on the Makai side of Kūkākūkūā. So like at one point there were almost 500 people living there. And by the time I was doing my field work, because of all of the sweeps and the over-policing of that area, they had been pretty much scattered till it was about 50 people who were called like the hardest to house. And in the mainstream media and mainstream policy discourse around the housing crisis, those people were sort of talked about in a way in which their agency was completely removed from them. They were like either demonized or kind of like romanticized as like you know, like either drug addicts and criminals, or like mothers who were working 3 jobs, and the reality was a lot more complicated, and most of them were Hawaiians. A lot of them worked multiple jobs, and I had this one experience where I interviewed a man named John Kolupali. He had been living in Kūkākūkūā, on the streets of Kūkākūkūā for like 20 years, and he was talking about how he had seen the neighborhood transform. Like while he was on the streets, he watched those big buildings go up, and had just constantly been subject to police violence and arrests and sweeps through the whole experience. And he would get emotional talking about, oh, now I'm gonna get emotional, talking about having all of his possessions taken by the police and stuff. He started to cry, and then I asked him at one point, like, well, how come you call yourself houseless instead of homeless? And then at that moment, he just like instantly just like toughened up, like had this strength in him, and he looked me straight in the eyes and he was like, I will never be homeless in Hawaii. Hawaii is the land of my ancestors. I have my culture here. I have my aina. And he was like, I will, and he just said it again, looked me dead in the eyes, I will never be homeless in Hawaii. I'm Kanaka. And I was like, the way that experience for me really shifted how I think about housing, because the way that our policy discussions are set up is always to treat housing as a commodity, to treat aina as a commodity. And the way that we actually experience home, whether you're Kanaka or working class, whether you, like, not just in Hawaii but everywhere, you experience home in an intimate, like, lived way. Like that's how you connect to the place that you're from, to the people that you love. And there's no space for talking about that in our housing discussions. So the way we talk about housing policy in Hawaii is, it's all by numbers, right? 60% of renters are, 60% of households are housing cost burden, meaning they spend 30% or more of their income on their housing costs. 30% spend half of their income. We have like the highest rates of houselessness in the nation, and then you'll hear this number repeated over and over again, that we need 50 to 60,000 new homes in the next 10 years in order to meet our housing demand. What that like numerical discussion does is reinforce this idea that housing is like a supply side issue. It's just a matter of how much you can produce, how quickly, at what price point. And it completely ignores the fact that housing is also a aina issue. It's a people issue. And it really sets us up for a discussion in which the only way to solve the housing crisis is to build more and build faster, and to remove every kind of regulation getting in the way of that construction. So before I pass the mic off to Mikhail, who is doing like really important stuff on the ground around this, I just wanted to highlight what that kind of narrative, what kind of policy that creates. So I'm sure most of you have heard about the governor's emergency proclamation on affordable housing. And in it, he basically highlights the cost of housing production as the major roadblock to solving the housing crisis. And his solution is to basically remove all regulation around housing production at any price point. So even though it's an emergency proclamation on affordable housing, what he's doing is removing regulations for developers who build at any price level. So there's actually not an affordability cap. His idea, not just his, this is not just a Governor Green problem, it's like a systemic problem. But the idea underpinning that is essentially that, like, if you build at any price point, it'll add to the supply and thereby like lower housing prices for the rest of us. And it really like gives all of the power to the developers. It says that it says that we have to do everything we can to ask them to build, and it takes away power from the people and who are. It takes away power for all of us who can't profit off of housing and land the way they can. And so I think that when we talk about capitalism and the economy here in Hawaii, like we said, it's like really about highlighting it always comes back to Aina, right? Like, it's about highlighting who's profiting from that and how they're manipulating our systems in order to like continue to extract. And I think, like, very quickly, I'll just maybe pose the question of like what housing policy would look like if we centered Aina and the working class. And to me, it looks like, sure, maybe building some new units, you know, but also it looks like increasing tenant protections for the 48% of households who rent here in Hawaii. It looks like not subsidizing, not handing public lands and public subsidies to private developers, but instead pursuing like robust community development agreements or community benefit agreements so that if they want to build here, they have to contribute to the public good. It also looks like trying to curb speculation through things like vacancy taxes or increased property taxes on second homes. All of these things that we could be pursuing if we just expanded the conversation and thought about housing as a human issue rather than just a market-based issue. Thank you.
Hello everyone, I'm Nikhil, and thank you for everyone who went before me. I'm with the Honolulu Tenants Union, so obviously here to talk about housing, but I actually wanted to learn a little bit more from you guys than you guys can learn from me. So if you guys don't mind participating in a real quick raising of hands. So I'm gonna say a statement. If it applies to you, we can learn a little bit about each other. Just raise your hand, okay? Everyone down for that? Yeah? Okay. Okay, I am a renter. Okay, I am someone who lives. Oh, keep it up, keep it up. I don't know if it gets tired, you can use your other hand to support it, maybe, but let's test our muscles today. I am someone who is living in temporary housing or housing that is subsidized by the government. You keep it up if you replied to the first one. Sorry, I should have explained the rules better. I'm someone who maybe pays a mortgage to the bank or to the government. I'm someone who is living on land that is leased out by the state or another entity like Bishop Estate or another corporation. Whew. Okay, there's just some people who haven't raised their hand. I'm curious, maybe they're the homeowners, maybe they're totally in control of their housing, but we got a lot of people out here who we would define as tenants. And so you can put your hands down now, thank you. And that was a majority of us, right? So we're people who are not in control of our housing. There's someone else that controls the place where we live. And that's kind of like a primary source of some of our issues, right? We work jobs to pay rent or our mortgages and just to sustain a place that has a roof over our heads, right? And so now I'm gonna say an issue, and if this issue applies to you, you can say aye or yes, whichever you prefer. And if it doesn't, then you can say no. So the rent is too damn high. Yeah? Maybe my landlord or the person in charge of my house isn't taking care of the property. Maybe there's something broken that they haven't taken care of. Yeah? I try to get in touch with my landlord, but man, he really doesn't respond to emails very well. Yeah? Okay, so these are just some things that we're affected by. So I'm gonna pick on someone. I'm gonna pick on you right there with the glasses. You said the rent was too damn high. Did you say yes to that? Yeah? Would you like to see that change? Yeah? A lot of other people said yes too, right? So let's say you alone, you go to your landlord, you're like, hey man, the rent's too damn high. What the heck? What's gonna happen? Probably, I might kick you out, he might just not listen to you, whatever, right? But now, hey, everyone in this room that said yes, we all go to your landlord's house. We say, hey, the rent is too damn high. Do this, change this, or else, right? So that's what the tenants union is about. We're about bringing people together over shared issues. Housing is something that affects us all. We all think of housing as our homes, as places where we want to chill out, have a good time with family, eat food, rest, have, a space to exist. I think we all deserve that, right? People over here on the panel talked about a space to grow food, talked about people without homes struggling against development. We talked about people who've had their lands taken from them, fighting back to find it. We're all connected by these struggles of not having control over our homes, and the landlords and the developers look at it as a way to make money. And most of us in the room raised our hands or said yes or whatever. So where are these people making the money? Right? There's very few of them. There's just a few corporations. And so the Honolulu Tenants Union, we go out into communities, we talk to people, and we build relationships with folks to be like, hey, look, you all have this issue. We're going to come together and fight for it as a group on the relationships that we have with one another. We're doing that work currently in Kapiolani Village, where there's a development happening by the Kobayashi Group, and they're building a 43-story tower and evicting 130 tenants, and that just sucks. So people over there are getting together, and they've gone to city council, and just with 30 people in city council, they've shut down a meeting and made this like a big deal, right? And I think there's more than 30 people here, right? So, yeah? Oh, I don't know about that one. That sounds bad. You want to tell us about that sometime? Yeah, anything that's happening that we're not in control of.
Trying to get into time.
Sorry.
We've gotten through one question, but you guys were providing such awesome answers. Tina skipped all the way to my fourth question and blew it away. So thank you. But I want to give everyone another chance to speak, and what I want us to address is what are some myths in your area of expertise or industry or your group that you think the public needs to kind of rethink or to understand a little bit better, and what's something really important about your organization that you want other people to know?
Happy to see Auntie Kūkākūā here because I think she's doing some awesome energy cooperative work in Waianae. And I do want us to continue to look at cooperatives as a model that works. Worker ownership is critical when we're building businesses in Hawaii, even more so if we're building them in coalition with each other. No one can stop us from that outside of personal profit, right? And so there are ways that we can contribute in an economy in a way that isn't extractive. And it is the way that our kupuna always thought, right? And so reverting back again to the way that our kupuna built industry does not mean that we're taking a step backwards. It means that we're evolving a step forward. And so what could a cross-island coalition of businesses that are working together to raise enough funds to overthrow the United States look like? I think it looks like something that we can all visualize in our mind right now. And would we all want to participate in that and be an equal owner, right? Could we start a community fund, right? $1, one vote. And we build that up and we use that and we build that to the point at which we don't have to ask permission to take back what is rightfully ours, which is this country. You know, this is our country. Our land is under occupation, but the people are not. We have a way to break the chains and free ourselves, and it doesn't have to be bloody. You know, it can be peaceful, it can be with aloha, but it has to be stern, and we cannot give up, even if we don't see it in our lifetime. So the story I like to share, when my great-grandmother, who was from Molokai, was passing away, she hands me a coin from the Hawaiian Kingdom, and she says, "You put this back in the bank when it reopens, or you give that to your child, and make sure that gets down to your grandchild, because that's going back where it belongs." And that's in our banking system, a banking system that is just and true, houses everyone here, ensures we have enough food for everyone here. I was just on Lanai. I was standing there in a field. The last mahi'ai in this valley was taken out at gunpoint 100x years ago by Dole Plantation. After their failed business venture, that land has been unfarmed. There's only 5 farmers back there. We're talking hundreds of acres. There's plenty of land here to house and feed our people. We just need to take it back. And there's ways to do so with community. And I think cooperatives are a way to do that. And I can maybe leave it at that for now. And I think that's a good segue into some of the work that Lehia is doing with Mala OEV.
Okay, this is what I was going to talk about, and Kim was like, easy. So, this doesn't really relate to your question, but I do want to answer that super quick. I think one of the biggest myths or misunderstandings, I think, is to solve this crisis, we just got to grow more food, right? And yes, that is certainly part of it. But I think what's missing in that conversation is, how do you get that food from people like me into people like you? It's that food system, so that food infrastructure, and I think that's why we're doing what we're doing. What Keone was saying, which I was really excited to talk about, and you mentioned it as well, this coming together, of individuals who are doing amazing work, and when they come together, how powerful that can be. Right now, I'm part of a network of OEV-led organizations doing biocultural restoration through agroforestry. And biocultural restoration is a fancy new term for restoring aina, but also restoring people's relationship with that aina, their cultural relationship, their personal relationship with that aina. So it's not just about growing food. Food is a vehicle for all of that. And so it's a bunch of us. Right now we have 14 members from across the state. And so you have people like Waipa on Kauai. They've been around for 29 years and they're stewarding 1,600 acres. You have on Oahu, we have Kako'o Iwi. They're part of our network and they've been around for 13 years and are stewarding 405 acres. We have us on Maui, been around for 3 whole years and we're stewarding 3 acres. And so when you put all of this together, that equals all 14 of us. That equals 237 years of organizational experience and access to 6,000 acres of aina. And so that's the power of all of us. Yeah. I only have 3, so that's not really for me, but we're getting there, and we are getting there. You know, right now, I can't say too much about it, but we do have an opportunity as Poli Farms to steward more aina, because there's attention given now to what we are actually doing with the 3 acres that we do have. And so that is the power of groups like this. Another member in our group just got access to 1,000 acres. You know, and so it's remarkable. And if you guys are interested, the group is called Mala OEV. So you look up malaoev.org. We have a very simple website. but we are organizing, and I hope that we can share a lot more about Malauiwi soon.
Okay, I'll do the myths question. The first, I have two that come to mind. The first one is that developers are gonna solve the housing crisis. And that one is for a very simple reason, that they're not selflessly building housing. They're not doing that out of the goodness of their hearts. They're doing that to accumulate profit. And that's like a really simple but dangerous contradiction, because if they were to solve the housing crisis, they would cut into their own bottom line. If we're really talking about making housing more affordable for regular people, it means bringing the cost down. It's like an inherent contradiction that for some reason we don't talk about. And then the second myth, which is a more like, conceptual, like maybe values thing, is that there's only one way to live. There's only one type of like ideal home, and that's like a Americanized single family home, like the American dream. White picket fence, or luxury condo, whatever. There's a little bit variation inside there, but I think that we see that like when we talk about multi-generational homes, kind of like as an indicator of the housing crisis. That is also a very like colonized way of thinking about living. Like for many of us, living with our families is a source of strength and also an indicator of like economic, hardship. But it can be both. And I think it's really important that we start expanding our ideas about home and housing and living together, because we see when you look at the history of Hawaii, contemporary history of Hawaii, so many of the movements that we celebrate at La Ho'iho'i'ea, they came out of housing insecurity. So like Haunani K. Trask wrote about Kalama Valley, that it was the birth of a movement. That was an anti-eviction struggle. And then we have, the folks at Sand Island, Mokauea, or you have the people at Pu'uhonua Omakua. Like, they were houseless on the beach, and that's not to romanticize that experience at all, but to say that out of that experience of living together on that aina and seeing that valley behind them being bombed, they not only fought against their own eviction, but they literally sparked a movement to stop the live fire training in Makua Valley. Like, there's something very, very radical about living outside of the Americanized experience of home, which is meant to isolate us. And so, like, if we can think more collectively and also, like, honor the way that people who, like, houseless Hawaiians have radically reshaped Hawaiian history through their struggles, not only for housing, but for, like, the entire Lahui.
So myth, individualism, or this is only happening to me. So you're faced with an issue, like maybe you moved out of your home and your security deposit was stolen, or maybe your landlord isn't fixing something on your property and you're like, wow, this is only happening to me. How do I solve this? And we need to start thinking about how this is being experienced by everybody. Everybody is experiencing an issue along these lines that people have talked about that connects us all. And so it really is the relationships that we build with our neighbors and with our communities and how we solve problems collectively that's going to actually change something. Like, I'm not going to be able to change your rent situation, right? You guys have to do that. And you and your neighbors in your community have to come together and be like, hey, this is messed up. If people are like, we cannot do anything on our own, but together we can do a lot. So that's a huge myth, and I think along with that comes this idea that this is the way it is. This is the way it's always been, and this is the way it's always going to be. And that none of those statements are true. Because there's this illusion of power that there's people up there that make decisions and there's systems that control everything. But if all of you were unhappy with us panelists and this tent and this organization, and you got up and uprooted the stakes and you disconnected the mics, this would not be happening, right? And so if you take that as an example of like the system that we live in, it's the people who run it that make it happen, right? It's everyone that's building these condos, that's packing the grocery stores, that's farming the fields, that makes things run. So it's our participation that makes this happen. So that means we have the power to put a stop to it and make changes. So yeah, those are the two.
Mic check. All right. So we're kind of at time, but I want to appreciate our panelists and all of the ideas and just kind of interesting ways that you made us all think. And I encourage our audience to approach them as well. If there's something that resonated with you, if there's something that you had more questions about, or felt like you wanted to work with, feel free. This is why people are here, right? Because we're all here to connect. We're all here to work together and to build a nation and put it forward. All right. So our next panel is going to be starting at 3:45. I saw Leo. 3:45, which is going to focus on militarism. So be right here if you want to stretch out with me again.
And don't forget to follow Purple Maya. Bust out your phones. Follow Purple Maya. Follow Poli Poli Farms. Follow the Honolulu Tenants Union. It's amazing right now what they're doing at the Piolani Village. And follow Tina Grandinetti. No, for real, watch her, because she is one of our most brilliant minds around housing, and she is the ultimate myth buster and like analyst on housing. We're super grateful. So hello everybody. And like Ryan said, our next panel is not only on militarism, it's an all-youth panel on militarism. And so even better. So yeah. Like normal, 5-10 minute break, and then we'll gather back over here for that panel. Mahalo.
Gonna start, and then that'll be like 2 more years of school, and then I'm fall hopefully. I am going to Stewart Land in Hilo. Yeah. Yeah, my mom or my grandma has some land, and when she passes away, and I will inherit some of her land. Yeah. That's that. Life has been good. Internship with Moku. Yeah, with Honolulu. Oh, Gabe. Do you know who Gabe is? Of course I know Gabe. Oh, yeah. Do we know each other?
Are you competitive right now?
No, I was doing math and stuff, but then I got a part-time field tech position.
Spoken around. Oh, really? Or I was like, oh, really?
I might do it in January. It was only for 6 months.
Native book sign. A little bit, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I just think so.
If you're a youth, come sit in the center. No periphery. Let the elders sit on the edges. Youth at the center, except for Kupuna right here. I'm talking about the other ones. The everyday adults can sit on the edge. Dude, sit down.
Oh, yeah, it feels up. See, I'm feeling out if I can get another term.
It's like triggering.
I've known Akil for a while. Johnny Energy.
Yeah, nice to meet you.
I guess that's the whole point. Trying to like learn and farm. Yeah, it's kind of the same time. Anytime you like that, I feel like I'm at the age where good. It's all good. I'd rather work with like they don't want you to leave. Better than being bored, unless you're bored at work.
I'm gobsmacked right now. Where are the stars?
Mine's good.
You were like, oh yeah, they live on the homestead. And I was like, oh yeah, I live on the homestead. We live right next door.
Ready.
Folks settling in, you're about to see something historic, folks. Something historic is about to happen in this tent. So folks, settle in, get ready, be supportive. We need a lot of aloha for this panel. We need a lot of aloha for this panel. This is a historic event, and why do I say that? Because not only, we always talk about militarism in occupation. We always do, because that's what we do. But this is one of the first times in a long time, if ever, that we have a youth-led discussion on militarism in Hawaii and what it's gonna take to think about a youth-led movement around militarism in Hawaii. Yeah? So we have a few questions with our amazing panelists, and I'm gonna let them introduce themselves because nobody knows you better than yourself, right? I'm going to begin with the far end down here. Our friend Ifit, go ahead.
Yeah, Ifit!
Thank you. Mr. Tong, he's the best social studies teacher ever. Anyway, my name is Ifit Happy Cruz. I'm from Waianae. Waianae. And I'm excited. Yeah, thank you.
Aloha mai kako. My name is Kanoa Makanahele Ventura Barreto. I live in Kailua, graduated from Kalaheo High School this year. Live in the shadow of Marine Corps Base Hawaii, Balos Air Force Station, and by extension the RIMPAC exercises every other year.
Ano ay may aloha kako pakahiapo. Owa kaya kahinali may kaina o Manoa. Aloha, my name is Hina. I am from Manoa, here on Oahu. I'm a graduate of Kumana Century Public Charter and of the Political Science Department at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. So yeah.
I got one. Hello? Okay. My name is Ki'inani Rosario. I'm from Waianae Valley. I graduated from Kapolei Charter School in 2021, and I am currently at Manoa for Mo'olelo O'iwi and Creative Media.
So as you can see, we have a range of locations, of knowledge, of age, and experience that we're going to be exploring with our young kia'i here. So we have an opening question. Why do you folks think it's important to build a youth movement for ea and imposing militarism in Hawaii? Anybody else?
If you are pro-militarism, you're anti-human. It comes down to that, you know. Militarism is the idea, you know, simply, that war should persist, and it is motivated by the fact that war for a select few is very, very profitable. You know, normal people, they aren't making lots of money as army contractors. They aren't making lots and lots of money watching, you know, their sons and daughters die, you know, in the Near East, you know, a little while ago in Vietnam, you know, fighting these absolutely pointless wars. No, normal people, they don't see the benefits of empire. And so there are two types of people who support militarism. There are those select few who are making lots and lots of money off of militarism. And then there are those who are misinformed. As a youth, you're particularly susceptible to this misinformation. You know, myself, I just graduated like Kanoa, and I was inundated with, oh hey, I'm Amy, and I work for the US Navy. Would you like to be in the Naval Reserves? Oh hey, you know, my name is John, and I'm coming to your school soon, and I think that you should join the Marines, and this is why. And, you know, it's no secret that they target, you know, low income and just really, you know, places with that are held at a lower socioeconomic level. And so this was felt by myself and all of my friends. It's dangerous. It's dangerous because you're going to get absorbed into that machine. My cousins, I'm Chamorro, I'm not Hawaiian. I'm Samoru, and like 1/12 of all Samorus will join the US military. My cousin, they're in the Marines. My mom talked about how she met one of my younger cousins when he was a little boy, and then seeing him become a Marine, getting a tattoo on his shoulder, Familia de Muerte, family of death. It's disgusting. You're absorbed. That is why on a personal level, you should not, and you should be very aware of that shark that is militarism. On a global scale, the US military or the Department of Defense consumes like 4.6 billion gallons of fuel a year. We're talking about like climate change, we're talking about, we need to stop eating meat, full stop. We need to stop, all of these different things. We need to stop an entity that is consuming like 12.6 million gallons of fuel a day to do nothing, to build empire, to kill people. Then you think about like gendered violence, just the violence that it has brought into all of these different parts of the world. And I know, I'm sorry, I'm going on, but it's disgusting. Like, it is so wrong. There is no defending militarism. If you are pro-militarism, you are anti-human.
I would say that the reason we should oppose militarism, the United States military occupation, and American occupation, and the reason we should support sovereignty and demilitarization is because really within the boundaries that those realities create, there's no potential that we will reach our full potential, right? There's no possibility, there's no future in which we can realize all the things that we could realize if we were not occupied, if we did not have the United States military. It just creates natural boundaries to change that can only go so far. It's so limiting to have these, political realities. It's like a tree that can only grow rotten or poisonous fruit, right? And so you can't change the roots of that tree. And, picking off the fruits isn't going to change the fact that the roots are producing, poisonous fruits, right? Because, over the course of the history of the United States military's, quote-unquote relationship with Hawaii, nowhere has there ever been found any honesty, any goodwill, any, proactive steps to do good, any transparency, any, sympathy or empathy with what we go through, with what the Aina goes through. It's never been found in their conduct, in the U.S. military's conduct, in the United States federal government's conduct. It's always been dragging their feet in the sand, lying, reacting like little kids who just got caught stealing from the cookie jar, right? It's ridiculous. With Red Hill, with Koho'olawe, with Makua, history's just repeating itself. And anybody who can't see the writing on the wall, or who thinks it can change to the extent that, we can coexist as neighbors, is really just not seeing the history and the present situation as well. And also there's the fact that we become complicit and proxy to global murder and destruction on a scale that Adolf Hitler would be jealous of. You know what I mean? It's ridiculous. All the justifications are false. All the pretexts for war, they're pretexts. And it creates serious risks for us. I mean, if there was ever a nuclear conflict, Kailua's gone, Waimanalo's gone, Kaneohe's gone because of the Marine Corps base, because of Bellows Air Force Station. And everything we're doing, all the Aina restoration, any changes we can manage to do despite U.S. occupation, it's gone and it doesn't matter. And so there's also that sense of urgency that, well, there's a quote by Martin Luther King Jr. that I think is really good. And it says, over the bleached bones and jumbled residues of numerous civilizations are written the pathetic words, too late. And so there's got to be that sense of urgency, and so that's part of why it's so necessary to fight for these things, because any day a conflict could start and we lose everything. Any day the next invasive species could get introduced through Schofield or Joint Base Pearl Harbor Hickam that wipes out all our lo'ikalo, and it doesn't even matter that we're doing aina restoration, right? So there's a lot to it, but yeah, it is absolutely necessary to fight against these things, and yeah.
Just want to kāko'o everything that my fellow panelists have already said, especially the point that Ife brought up about the impact on youth here in Hawaii. But I wanted to talk about a little bit globally. I had the privilege this past couple months ago to be a part of the Hawaii delegation to the International Women's Network Against Militarism. It was hosted in the Philippines this year by a group called Kūkākūkūā, which is a group of Filipino women who have survived the sex trade and the sex tourism industry in their aina by the U.S. military. So yeah, I think that youth movements are incredibly important because we need to be the voice to take up all of the work that the kupuna before our kupuna and Moku have done before us. But also, like, as we know through at least our history and Hawaiian movements, that intergenerational movements are the most successful ones, and intergenerational movements are the ones that bring us together and create results. So yeah, I'll be talking a little bit more about just a share back from that militarism, Women Against Militarism Network meeting, but yeah, mahalo.
I completely agree with what my fellow panelists have been saying. I think it is in fact a global issue, and a lot of blood has been shed over the many, many years that the military has been in Hawaii. But I think my reasoning for caring so much about deoccupation and having the military out of here is because I think that we should be focusing on telling our story and putting our voice out there and talking. And I look out today, and every time I come into a big group of people, I always remind myself that these are also people like me, so I don't get too scared, you know? But you guys, everybody has their own lives, and everyone, I think that being able to tell our story, our way is important, because if we don't do it, then they will do it for us. And we have seen it. They have been doing it for us, and I don't agree with it. I don't agree with the story that they're putting out. And I think having the youth involved, and especially what Hina was saying about intergenerational movements are the most successful, I completely agree. I had the privilege of meeting somebody today named Makanoi, and they gave me this quote, and they said this, and I was like, that was straight bars, I need to write this down. And I was like, okay, so this is what they said, and I was taken aback, but it's about kupuna being involved and descendants evolving. And I thought about that for a moment, because I think it's important to have our voice as well as the voice of the past, so that we can therefore form the voice of our future and for our keiki and our mo'opuna.
You cried, and I'm like crying right now. So that's beautiful. Knocking myself out of my own questions. Okay, can I begin with you coming back this way? Okay. Yeah, hold that mic, baby. Hold that
Keep
mic.
it in hand.
Okay, big question, tough question for the group, and for many people who work with you. What do you folks think is missing from the current youth activism and organizing landscape right now?
That is a very big question, Joy. And I have thought about it a lot, because I just feel like in my experience, what I have found that has been missing is that building that base. Because in my experience as growing up in Hawaii and Wai'anae, a lot of things aren't told to me. I have to, piece things together. They're like, oh, you're young yet, you don't have to worry about this. But then all of a sudden, now I'm this OPO, and now everybody wants me to talk about these things that nobody told me about ever. So I think having that initial, learning period, and I was so afraid to speak on my experiences because I felt that I was uneducated and I hadn't been exposed to enough of what they were asking me to speak on. But I think it's just that not throwing in the youth and being able to reconstruct the roots, like what Kona was saying. And if the roots are poisoned, then you just gotta de-soil and try again. And I think being unafraid to try again is what a lot of youth are missing these days. And I feel like if you do instill that base and give them the tools and the knowledge to do that, then they won't be so scared anymore.
Just speaking from my own personal experience, youth, what do we think is missing from this past week? Just speaking from my experience, I think that it's really easy to get detached from these kinds of issues, especially growing up in the COVID era. I know you folks went through high school, and I went through a little bit of my college experience in the COVID era, and I think it really easily detaches us from the urgency of these issues. It's something that I've had to overcome and kind of refocus and recenter, and it's really easy to focus on these issues when it's right in front of your face, but often we get distracted and taken off our path and burdened with all of the other kuleana of life. But I think that it's really important for us to refocus. I don't necessarily think that, I wouldn't say that this is missing from youth activism and youth organizing, but one of my kumu has said this quote to me, and it's always stuck with me, is education is the key to liberation. And I think that it might not be like missing, but I think that that type of education normalized within Hawaii is what our youth need to be radicalized and to be activated into this kind of work and these kinds of efforts. I was lucky enough to be in a kula that taught us these kinds of things and brought us to these kinds of events against the military. And so I grew up privileged enough to be able to see these things and to see how critical they are in our communities. But I think that what we're missing is that aspect in the education systems today everywhere, so that all of these haumana can see from a young age how critical this is, how it impacts not just us here in Hawaii and our aina and our lahui, but more broad, and I'll speak a little bit about that later, about the effects of the US military on countries around the world. It's horrifying and sobering and something that we need to be focusing on and talking more about as Kūkākūkūā Hawaii.
I would say one thing that's missing, first of all, is really a solid, good amount or huis that are dedicated, to youth organizing against the U.S. military occupation, against American occupation, against capitalism. I think that's something that needs to be built that doesn't currently exist to the extent that we need it to exist. And so it is something we need to work on. But as for what is missing from youth organizing in general, I would say it's a willingness and a confidence to be really open and explicit and straightforward about what our beliefs are, what we're fighting for, what our end goals are long term. And because I think there's a lot of walking on eggshells in a lot of youth organizing right now. There's a lot of not wanting to generate outrage or backlash or stuff like that. And there's a lot of hoping that, I think false hoping that by playing nice, that by being, I guess like reserved and not always speaking your mind and biting your tongue all the time, that you're going to get what you want. That if you always play by the rules and the ways that you're taught to play by, that you'll get what you want, whether that's voting or legislative stuff or lawsuits, which isn't to say that those aren't pieces of the puzzle. They have their role to play, but What's missing is that willingness to be explicit and to work from outside of the system and to organize in spaces that are not what we are told to work within. Whether that's union organizing or civil disobedience or, you know, blockade, sabotage, maybe even revolution someday. I hope not. I would hate to see violence in Hawaii, like armed violence, but it might be necessary, and that's something we have to think about. We have to think about these potential forms of resisting what's happening to us beyond what currently exists, and we just have to get back to not always playing nice and not always, you know, getting walked all over by the powers that be. And so I'd say that's missing, and also just recognizing that organizing is what we need to be doing, that we need to be going into these communities and these spaces that we operate in on a day-to-day basis. The schools we go to, the universities we go to, our classmates, our workplaces, our unions, whatever it may be, Aina restoration sites we go to, and organizing and getting, you know, connecting with our fellow community members, our ohana, our friends, and building power that way, and not, you know, putting out a kahea and saying, because this is something I did in the past and I've learned from that, putting out a kahea and saying, hey, I'm gonna go sine wave on the side of the street, join me. But you don't even have the people yet to join you. You haven't built up that base of people. And, you know, really it brings awareness, but it doesn't accomplish what's needed, right? Sign waving or stuff like that. And so really it's necessary to recognize that organizing is crucial to what we want to accomplish. And yeah, I'll stop there for now.
You know, when you started listing off like blockades and sabotage, I was like, oh no, we're about to say the bad things. And, you know, yeah. We aren't saying the bad things right now. At least, you know, entre nous, we plan to do some disruptive things. But we're not talking about doing the bad things now because we are not in the space for that. Speaking of disruption, that is what organizing is supposed to be. Organizing is inherently disruptive. Organizing is what killed Fred Hampton. Organizing is what, you know, locked up Honolulu Trask. Organizing is what got all of these different federal agencies descending on this small little town called Wounded Knee. Organizing is dangerous to systems that are dangerous to people. And so when we say, oh yeah, what's happening with youth organizing? Nothing's happening with youth organizing. Youth organizing, and I know I'm gonna say more bad things, youth organizing doesn't exist right now. You know what youth organizing is? It's like, it's going to your community board meeting. It's being told, you're the future, and the world is dying, and it's on you. You have to do this. And then being told, and you know how you do this? You vote. That's not happening. No, that is not happening. And of course, like Kanoa said, and I'm basically saying everything Kanoa said, and all my fellow panelists said, the sense of urgency is not there, and the solutions that are being put forward do not match the sense of urgency that is communicated in the problem statement. Like, oh yeah, the world is dying, and you know, the world, you know, the DoD is spending so much money on fuel, you know, the DoD is getting so much money, all of that jazz. But our solutions are, oh yeah, the Hulihia is voting. Hulihia, that's what they talk about, like Hulihia. What does that mean? Education, and I'm sorry, I think about this so much, but we hear education, and we hear it from those, you know, those members of wonderful nonprofits who are doing great work in their silos. We hear it, oh yeah, we need to educate the masses. They don't say masses, they say people. I say masses. We need to educate people, we need to educate. And then, you know, as a student, I like sat back and I saw like my peers, you know, reflecting. They were like, okay, what do we do with this education? And they were like, oh yeah, we educate. Okay, cool. And then they said, oh yeah, knowledge is power. And I say, cool, But, you know, power for what? And how are we going to use that power to get, you know, actual power, you know? And that, you know, the last question, and I know we're running short on time, so I'm just gonna like say my piece now. What do I want to see from a youth movement? What do I want to see from a youth movement? I want a youth movement to be successful. And I want a youth movement to move, and move with vigor and speed and, you know, fury. Because youth should be furious. Because our future, what Kanoa said earlier, there is no future that exists as long as the US military persists. There is just no future. We're dead. You know, I'm Samoru. I got the awesome opportunity to see the jaga trees, to see beautiful, beautiful, beautiful karst forests in Guam, in Guahan. I got to see Ratidian. I got to go up and swim in that water. They are clearing that, dude. And they're gonna use it for live fire training if they aren't already. And you know what else? They're doing live burning. You know, open burning. Burning, you know, hazardous, murderous chemicals. And that is our challenge. That is what we are working against. And that is why youth movements need to be revolutionary. And revolutionary in the sense that they are building. And building power.
I just wanted to hop on that and say, I think I agree completely. A youth movement should be about building. And I agree, I'm righteously furious. But I did want to say that I believe in movements being steady. And in order to build that speed and get to that vigorous standpoint, we need to build from the ground up. And what I want to see is building those pilino with other communities, with especially within our Pa'aina, with other people of oceanic descent, you know, Samoans, Micronesians, all of those people who we have been separated against, who we have been turned against, and we fight each other when we should be uniting to fight, you know, I'm not gonna say what I want to say, but I just think that if we're not able to, like, I keep going back to this idea of the poison, having poison roots, and if we're not able to fix that, I don't think that we'll be able to successfully create a movement, because I think that's what we're doing, is creating a youth movement. And I think just being able to connect with people, and I think that is really my focus, is connecting with everyday people who are being affected. Like, it's not those big bosses behind their desks pushing the big red button. It's everyday folks who are being harmed by the chemicals they're putting into our water, that are being harmed by the generations and generations of just trauma they have inflicted upon us. And I think it's going to be a lengthy process to unlearn all of those things, but it's one that's worth doing. And especially for our Mokupuni and our keiki, I always think about what the world I want my children to grow up in, my nephew, looking at him as a baby and just wanting better, and being able to do that for the future.
Just tell them what you got in the water out there in my night. I'm telling you, yes. So this is the last question, but I do want to kind of break before the last question, which if it already started to answer, is kind of turn to Hina a little bit to give us a little bit more about what you experienced in the Philippines, that story. And I know you have kind of an ask as well of folks. So if you want to, are you okay to talk about that now? Okay, yeah.
So just give a little context about the International Women's Network Against Militarism. We have a founder here in the audience, Auntie Terry Vitukaolani. Mahalo, Auntie, for doing all of this work to make it possible for us. But yeah, it's an organization, international, with different folks from Guahan, Okinawa, Korea, folks in the US, just places where the US military has greatly impacted their people and their aina. And it was just an incredible experience to be able to go there and share back with the different delegations about what's happening in their place and how we can support each other, how we can base build and create movements in our respective places, but also to how to spread the word like we're trying to do here and support each other. Yeah, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, the wahine, the Filipino wahine who hosted us were a part of an organization called Buklod. They're based in Olongapo, which is in Subic Bay, which was one of the biggest military navy ports in the world at a certain time. They got kicked out in 1991, so far to them. But if the long-term effects of that military occupation in Olongapo and in the larger Philippines is insane and vast, and the type of damage and violence that happened to them there is still very present today. Though that specific organization works with women who are, as I mentioned, in the sex tourism is what they like to call it. So a lot of military folks come to that place specifically in Subic Bay to take advantage of the Filipino women there, and they have very little say about what's their own bodily autonomy, and it was horrifying to hear about the history, but also to witness it in real time. It wasn't just happening in the 60s and the 70s and the 90s. I saw it in front of my own eyes. Wahine, as young as my kaikaina, my two little sisters, 14. It was really difficult to see, and I think through that experience, it definitely has radicalized me and helps me get to a point where I shouldn't have, become normalized to the things that are happening. It shouldn't have taken me going across the world to another place to realize how horrible the U.S. military is and all the damage that they do to places across the world. I should have just seen it happening in my own aina, and it was really impactful to be able to connect with those wahine and share, support them as much as we can, and to just connect at Alma Bulawan, who is the head of the Buklod organization. We found out we have similar ancestry. We're actually cousins, so that was a nice pilina to make. But yeah, so I just wanted to share a little bit about what they're going through right now. I'm not sure if you folks are familiar or not, but there was a super typhoon that went through the Philippines over the past week, and it has devastated a lot of their homes and their core office where a lot of the wahine find sanctuary in Olongapo has been completely flooded. A lot of them are without homes. I was talking to them this morning, without food, they need a lot of, there's blankets and shelter, and so because these wahine are not allowed to work right now because of the natural disaster, but their work is through the bars and through that trafficking avenue, and it's crazy that that's their life sustenance. That's what they need to do to put food on the table, to provide for their families. That's crazy to me, and it's unacceptable that the U.S. military, even not in their presence, isn't there in Olongapo anymore, but it still is. The effects are still there, and it's insane. But I just wanted to call out a little bit. We're doing a fundraiser for them at the Voices Women Speaks tent, so if you want, please come down to support. We're selling lupias and mochi, and all of the proceeds are going to go to support the Buklod wahine. And if you want to support in any other ways, we're also going to be sending packages back to the Philippines, and words of support and monetary support. If you folks want to find out more about that, please come talk to me after. We're very connected to these wahine. Our struggles are the same. The type of violence that is inflicted upon them by the U.S. military to this day is unacceptable, and as Kanaka, we need to support them. So please, if you can, support the Women's Voices Women Speak booth, and then also if you want to come in and talk to me after, I'm down to walao. Mahalo.
Okay, we just have a few more minutes, so Ifit, you've already answered this question, but what do you want to see or help to build the youth movement? what do the rest of you want to see to help build your movement? Anybody? You.
Wait, is it? Can you guys all hear me? Okay. So I would say that as far as what I want to see, I want to see a youth movement, a youth organization, a movement of youth organizing, whatever it may be, which understands their place in the bigger picture that is history, and understands, you know, what we are up against, and just how criminal, how murderous the United States military is, right? We need to have that same sense of urgency, of moral obligation to fight against what we are dealing with, as like the White Rose did back in Nazi Germany, the students who fought against the rise of, you know, the Nazi regime in Nazi Germany. We need to have that same sense of how murderous this institution is, how destructive it is, how much more so than really any other empire or country or regime ever has been in the history of anything. The United States military beats them all by a long shot. And so any youth movement or organizing is going to need to recognize that fact and respond accordingly and act accordingly. And recognize that this is something that cannot be coexisted with or reformed or anything like that, or made nicer, or, you know, make the head of the Department of Defense a black guy. Like, no, it doesn't solve our problems, you know what I mean? It's got to be recognizing that, you know, the U.S. military itself is a root problem that needs to be removed. And, you know, obviously, well, capitalism behind that, which gives them the incentives to do what they do. And, you know, when it comes to root problems, you don't take off the leaves of the root, you don't cut it off above the surface, you take the root, you yank it out of the soil, and maybe put mulch or something, I don't know, right? But just like...
You have to, like, do a whole, like, the soil needs to be changed, the roots need to be trimmed.
But it's just essentially to say that there's no way around getting them out completely, down to the last base, the last soldier, the last bullet, the last tank, the last everything. We don't want them anywhere. We don't want any leftover Guantanamo Bay type situations. None of that nonsense. We don't want them here as an independent country like South Korea has to deal with, like Japan has to deal with. We want them gone, period. And so that's what any youth movement's gonna have to recognize, I think. Yeah.
What I would like to work on and what I would like to see is building those connections with each other and with, because for me, I believe that you need to connect to the Aina in order to connect to yourself. And if you can't connect to yourself, then there's no shot you can connect with the people around you. And I think connecting to the people around you is very, very important towards building movements like this, because it's in the people. And it's always going to be in the people, no matter how many generations pass. And I think that's what our kupuna knew and thought about. And I think we need to think about that. And I think because for me, I always catch myself thinking about these huge movements, and I'm like, well, I'm just this 19-year-old from White, and what can I do? But I always like to remind myself that what I have to say and what I do does matter, even if I'm not toppling patriarchies, you know what I mean? I'm making a difference for myself, and once I do that, I can start making a difference for others.
Down goes the patriarchy.
Ayo.
You're taking the patriarchy down one by one. Alright. So let's give it up for our panel one more time. This has been, I'm like in tears, like I'm emotionally like so moved. These are folks who are developing organizers. These are the things that they're thinking about, where we're going, right? Because we know that folks were nervous. We were nervous, like they're like, we're not existing organizers. I was like, you're trying to be though. And we have to admit that we got to start from someplace. And if this is where they're starting, right? I feel pretty good, but I'm also like, grown-ups, that's why we got to have their back. That's why we got to have their back. That intergenerational piece. We are building a movement together. So we've been given permission. Oh, what's that in the back? What's the QR code?
Oh, I cannot see that far.
We can't see that. I don't know what this says.
No, not my window.
Oh, okay. I'm the director of Hawaii Peace and Justice, and I'm also the vice president of Honolulu. If you want to build with organizations that are collectively, we are working in partnership to build a youth movement and think and tackle these questions. Also coming up in October, Puialoha Aina is going to be doing a summit to talk about stopping the renewal of the Army leases. Something to keep in mind. Hawaii Peace and Justice, we also do a youth liberation camp every spring that we're starting. We just started this year. But we do have a little bit of time. We've been given permission for questions for just a few minutes until the next panel starts. So if folks have questions, we can take just like one or two before the next panel. Yes.
You there?
Hello.
Hello.
So I know two of you. You read anyone that? I know. I wanted to preface this question by giving a little bit of context to it. When I was thinking about when you guys were talking about how we have to have this united youth movement, we have to have these kind of revolutionary mindsets. One thing that I came across, and a big struggle of mine, was the fact that one of the greatest losses in Hawaiian history was the dissolution of our, it's gonna sound weird, but our homogeneity. The fact that our Hawaiian majority was lost. And I'm a proud Hapa Hawaiian. So I'm like 8 different races, so I'm not dissing any of them. I love them all. But it is a true fact that when we lost the Hawaiian majority, we lost our political power. And, or we lost a large majority of our political power. So what I wanted to ask was, in this new age where we only make up 20% of the population in Hawaii, where more than half of us live on the mainland, on the continent, and where our islands are populated with a dozen other ethnicities that we can all love, but we have to be understanding that they have different points of view. How do we as youth organizers organize those other backgrounds and get them so involved that they would die for the Mahui like I would? So how do we get our message to them without making them feel like we're trying to kill them?
So I would say from personal experience, interestingly enough, I went to Kalaheo High School, and so all of the kids who live in Marine Corps Base Hawaii, they go to Kalaheo High School. Military kids, right? Dependents, mostly from the continent. And you have that in Kailua as well, either living on base or getting off base housing, which is also atrocious considering the housing crisis we're in, that people can get housing off base as well, in addition to like the 9,000 homes they take up on base. But anyway, so what I would say is that, the military kids I go to school with, their parents even, they're in not the exact same boat we're in, but a very similar boat, I would say, in a lot of ways. They get screwed over in a lot of the same ways we do. Obviously, with the Red Hill crisis, a majority of the people poisoned were service members and their family members, hospitalized, jet fuel put into their bodies, into their, people who are pregnant, losing their dogs, losing whatever it may be, and we haven't experienced or seen the long-term health impacts. And the kids at Kalaheo High School, some of them will tell you, my dad or my mom or whoever, they joined because they were poor. They joined because it was either going to prison or joining the military. Those are stories I've heard, right? And these are kids who, if their parents didn't join the military, because of the economic system we're under, which is capitalism, they would have grown up in poverty. They wouldn't have the houses they have now on base. They wouldn't have, steady income. But also, they suffer in the sense that they lose that sense of place that they would have from growing up in one place over the course of their whole childhood. They get moved around and they don't have that sense of connection. And so I feel for them, right? I have a classmate, he's indigenous to like southeast, what we know as the southeast United States. And he struggles to connect with that because he's been moving around, right?
Kanoa, can I just pause you right there? Because Kikna wants to jump in real quick. We only have like 2 more minutes.
Okay.
Big Mom.
Yeah, Maikai, I think that these people do not feel any connections, like they are very isolated, and to speak towards organizing with them, I think building those relationships and understanding their circumstance so that we can therefore explain ours. Because they're not going to want to listen to our perspective if we are not listening to theirs. And I know that sometimes it boils my blood to sit there and listen to some of these stories, but it's something that I have to do because I care about spreading my message towards to everybody. And I think, for me, I think it's just to remind us that nobody is untouched by militarism. And like for me, my papa fought in Vietnam. He won a Medal of Honor for fighting in that war. He went twice. He went for his brother so his brother wouldn't have to be drafted. And I just like, militarism is just, it's not something that's we can just remove ourselves completely from. It's gonna take that work and building those relationships with people that really, we need to understand their voices as well so that we can amplify all of ours.
Yeah, sorry. As like the non-Hawaiian on this panel, dude, just tell me what, tell me when. Like, no, legit. And to say that, you know, and you know, I totally respect German Mana'o, but political power was not lost when Hawaiians lost homogeneity, you said? Yeah. So it's, no, nationhood was preserved in the documents that were made by Hawaiians, the diplomacy that Hawaiians practiced, but also, and of course, you know, yeah, it's just, I mean, you can look at like the 1950s, you know, democratic revolution, or you can look at the labor organizing like in the 20s in Hawaii. That was, you know, that was...
You can look really far back to the Ku'e petitions. Our kupuna have always been there trying to say our piece. And I think a part of that, of people not listening, is the powers have a bigger voice. You know, they're making these political cartoons about Lili'u o Kalani, they're telling all of these stories, and our kupuna, they have been there trying. And if you do look back, like, we did not lose the power. The power has been there in the people. It was just about listening.
And finally, like, just, and I know this is, you know, this is good natured, this is fine, but it's always important to inspect the narratives that you're putting out. That kind of comes off as like, oh, what do you mean Landback? You want all the white people off the land? I'm wearing the shirt Landback. No, that is not what Landback is about. And of course I'm not strawmanning you, but we always have to inspect these ideas and these narratives as youth who, you know, are potentially, you know, putting them forward. And that's all I have to say, but legit. And like, just period, like in general, like all of us. Tell us what, tell us when, tell us where.
Mahalo, we're getting ready, we're gonna be jumping into the next panel. But how amazing was that? Fire! Mahalo to all of you. I'm gonna give this back over to Iulai Malong to introduce the next panel.
And we're still under the tent, yeah?
Yeah, so you guys can come check us out at the Hawaii Peace and Justice, the Hawaii Peace and Justice tent. Over there.
Yeah, when Ethan said there's no youth organizing going on, he meant aside from what's going on at Hawaii Peace and Justice. So, go visit the Hawaii Peace and Justice tent, and you youth were freaking fire. You guys were awesome. Good job. Amazing. Keep going. We're here to support you. Yeah, hang out, gang. We got just a couple-minute transition, and actually we have our final panel of the day, land struggles. And we are going to be talking land title with Keal Moku, and we are going to be talking Pohaku Loa with Alakai. And so hang out, and we are just going to take a minute to transition.
2, 1, 2, 2.
They found each other and they're very, small little pools that's they're kind of like I was like, facilitating, they already got
Aloha nui kākou will be starting the final panel of the day shortly. Mahalo nui everyone for coming. This Kūkākūkūā tent is hosted by Hui Aloha Aina o Honolulu. If you're interested in getting involved, getting organized, you can find out more. There's 2 branches represented here, 3 if you count Uncle. And you can check out the Honolulu branch to your right or the Malama Aina branch to your left. Kalei Aina. But they do a lot of Malama Aina. So I have a short introduction for us that I'll read through and then I'll hand it over to our panelists. So welcome kākou to the final panel of the day. As we know, Aina back is at the core of our struggles for ea. Ua mau ke ea o ka aina I ka pono. Repeat after me. Ua mau ke ea o ka aina I ka pono. The sovereignty of our land is perpetuated in pono. Like Kalekoa said during the flag ceremony, our ea is tied to this aina, not to a person, not to a hui, not to a government, but to this aina. Since 1893, they've tried to sever our pilina from our aina by cutting our ties to governance, sovereignty, our language, our culture, and in some ways, they've been pretty successful. But still, we rise. Ea mai ke kai mai, ea mai Hawaii. Today, we're lucky to have 2 amazing Aloha Aina who are facing these land struggles head-on using different strategies and tactics to get land back. Our panel today features Alakai Kapanui and Uncle Keo Moku Kapu. Yeah, give them some aloha. So I couldn't come up with an intro short and succinct enough for these panelists, so I'll have them introduce themselves as well as their land back efforts to kick us off.
Pui, aloha me kākou, o alaka I kapunui ko inoa, o noho o Kona motua ke ave mai au. My name is Alaka I Kapunui. I live in Kona. My wahana comes from Kona. And I am a founding member of a hui called Huliau Unawahi Kapu, which is the turning points of sacred spaces. And we are looking directly at the Kūkākūkūā occupation and the land lease and what it would take to pull with the military. And it is immensely more complex than a lot of information that's been put out would lead you to believe. So we'll talk a little bit about that.
Hello, my kako. My name is Kūkākūkūā. I live in Lahaina, Maui in Kaula. And short introduction. I'm the Pelekekena for Hui Aloha Aina o Malo Ulo Lele. So we get 3 factions here. Well, actually 4. We have one sitting next to me, which is a member of Hilo too as well. I also, my political side is a political rec because we have a lot of organizations that we run through. I run a non-profit 501c3 known as Naikani o Maui Culture and Research Center in Lahaina. So anytime you guys come to Lahaina, can check me out. What else? We're also, with my wahine in the front, the founders of Kūkākūkūā LLC. And that's why I say I'm a political rep, because in order to get kind of plugged into this de facto system, sometimes you gotta embed yourself in the politics of today's illusions. So, just short. I live in Kaula Valley. I wanted to just go home and plant kalo, but that wasn't possible because Kupuna said that you're needed elsewhere, and that's why I do what I do today. But I think the main mission is to go out throughout Kauai and really teach everybody what idol is all about, and I hope that I can infect everybody with this virus today. So, aloha.
Okay, so Alakai, my first question is for you. You mentioned that you're a founder of Kahuliao o na Wahikapu. Earlier when we were talking, you were explaining to me a little bit of how that organization got started and how you folks came to the conclusion that, hey, we got to do something. Could you share with all of us a little bit about that journey and how Kahuliao o na Wahikapu got started?
So it really stems first and foremost from me being a Mauna Kea Kia'i and being on the Mauna for around 8 months and being woken up at 2 a.m. from guns going off and bombs. You don't sleep through that. And the 2 wahine that I started this with, they have had similar experiences or they have seen the health impacts and mental health impacts on their ohanas and their community in Waimea of the noise that is just constantly bombarding that community, and then even in Waikoloa experiencing the dust that comes off of that those training practices, and it blows down into Waikoloa and it has lead and depleted uranium in the dust, and seeing the asthmatic impacts on the people in that community. And so we started looking into it, and we found that it is very, very complex and not nearly as simple as a lot of people think it is. It's not just the one lease that's coming up in 2029. It's that's the original lease from the DLNR, but the rest of the 100,000 acres that the military is on is purchased from Parker Ranch, and when that lease is up, they will not stop. And so we're really looking into it and maybe trying to get
a water aquifer impact assessment because there is none. And we have precedents from what happened on Koho'olawe that we know that if the military continues to bomb one area, they will crack the water table. And we know that Kūkākūkūā supplies water to most of the island. And so that's really how we're going to try to push the military into just getting out, you know?
Uncle Carol Moku, so you've spent a lot of your life really fighting different land struggles, and you've been, you've got some victories under your belt as well. Could you share a little bit about how you got into researching land title and how that's taken you to where you are today? Maybe share a little bit about the aina that you are struggling on in the back, and what this process is teaching you about our power.
First of all, my litigations have been ongoing for 23 years, and it's not over yet. Because 2019, the Supreme Court made final summary judgment with prejudice on a parcel that we live on in Kauaula Valley. Things haven't settled, but what kind of driven me into what we do is my dad. And my dad, back in 1996, told us that we gotta go home, and we gotta go home now. And I didn't understand it at that time, but in 1999 was actually the deadline, for an adverse possession rule that came from the legislation of 20 years of adverse. So my father knew at that time. He said that this is the timeline. My dad basically got exiled from Maui in 1947 because some little kid I went happened with Pioneer Mill. But my dad got exiled. He never thought that he could come home, but he didn't understand the statutes of limitations. So we went home, and my father said, we gotta go home now, because if we don't, then we'll lose the opportunity. So that kind of stuck to me. Why all of a sudden we had to go home, and why the pivotal point in 1999 was that time, until I later on learned that in the legislation in 1979, there was a 10-year adverse possession clause. Later on, the legislation felt that Native Hawaiians were being robbed of their right to adverse possession, so they continued the adverse possession rule for another 10 years, which is the only way that if companies wanted to squat on your land, they would have to adverse that land for exactly 20 years, notorious, in order for them to file an adverse possession claim. That kind of opened up a bigger window of opportunity for me back then to understand what was happening in the politics when it came to land titles. So I met this one attorney. His name was Richard McCarty. He was my attorney. All of a sudden, this guy comes. He comes to one of my presentations at the Ritz-Carlton, and I'm talking about the Big Five. After the presentation, he says, "My name is Dick McCarty. I'm here to help." I started laughing. I said, "Brother, if you don't know what land titles are all about in Hawaii, and if you're going to travel with me, you better put on your safety belt, because it will take you for a long ride. An area that you never ever experienced before in your life." So he's been my personal attorney for 15 years, and because of him, we kind of educated each other. I had to educate him about kingdom law, the kanawai, how titles actually work, basically in the de facto government, which is the state of Hawaii, which everything was forced. And we learned from each other. He's been my personal attorney for 15 years. He brought me all the way to when I had to go in front for the last final time in front of the courts to fight for my case, and he died in 2015. So I was kind of a little bit stuck. I never know what to do. But he wrote me a letter in his dying bed. And he said, brother, you got it. All you got to do is concentrate on who you are, your identity and character, your whole background on what your Moku is all about, what your family trait was back then, what do you know about your Vahipana. So that was kind of key to me. Literally, it's telling me do your homework because you already did your homework. Yeah, stay the course and play it through. But when he died, wow, man, that kind of put a big wrench in me. So I made calls out there, I sent emails out there. I sent one email to my attorney today. His name is Lance Collins. And Lance Collins' co-attorney was Bianca Isaki. I think some people here is represented by Bianca too. A lot of cases that is going on, environmental issues and stuff like that, they represent. So I made an email, I sent it out to Lance, and immediately he responded back, and he literally told me that, you know, condolences, I never knew that your attorney passed away. And he said, I'm gonna take on your case. So that was kind of like, wow, heavy burden off of my shoulder. But from that time, he said, okay, what do you have? So I just gave him a piece of paper, about 21 pages, and I said, this is who I am. Then from there, I guess that's all it took in order to convince the judge that this issue should be in land court, not in circuit court. But being that we're stuck in circuit court, yeah, the documents that he prepared was enough to submit those documents to show that I had a valid interest to a jury trial. So within that jury trial, it was about 4 days, the jury found out that Pioneer Mill never owned the property, which in turn, the property that was signed over to this land company never had title to these properties. And from that point, the jury said, judgment to kill Kūkākūkūā. Yeah. They filed in the Intermediate Court of Appeals. The Intermediate Court of Appeals immediately within, you know, when you go into the Intermediate Court of Appeals, normally it takes about 4 years here for them to make a determination on whether or not the circuit courts erred, but they didn't. So they coincided with the circuit court. Then the company that I was dealing with filed an appeal with the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court immediately said, within 1 week, you're done. So, judgment from the Supreme Court with prejudice. And I thought, oh, that was over. But no. Now I'm fighting for my water. Now all of a sudden, if a lot of you think that just because you win title, the game ain't over. Because now you gotta fight for your resources, because this company all of a sudden formed a public utilities company and they started selling 100% of the water that went from our valley. So I filed petitions here, I did all these things, but I've learned a lot, and it only takes, yeah, an affidavit to file with the Bureau of Conveyance to show that you have standings in order to continue the argument. Once you do that, the judges recognize that if you do have standings from that point, yeah, then you're set for trial. We've been losing the battle for years. I've been in land court cases, I don't know, I had 8 simultaneous cases all at once. Every time you see one notice in the newspaper that somebody filing one complaint against a kupuna who died in 18-something, yeah, we stood up. Me and my wife went there, and we tried to hold space for families who couldn't participate. So we held space. If nobody came to object to the quiet title, I would stand up. And I would say, I'm here in representation of that kupuna. So the attorneys send the argument. And I think that's where everything relies when it comes to, you know, this de facto government of where we're in. And it all boils down to, I think Bumpy said it clearly. He said that, you know, all titles in Hawaii are clouded. And I think that what all of us gotta grasp, that if you get Kupuna, that was during that time, that had Kuleana, go look in a book over there, they get in a corner, the Kūkākūkūā petition. If their name is in there, then they're totally against the annexation. And if they're against the annexation, you gotta look where that Kupuna resided. Because if they resided within one Kuleana, one Ahupua within an island, sure enough, all land titles in Hawaii is cloudy. Even Kūkākūkūā, even Kahōlawe, all those state lands run by DLNR. But we just gotta get the entity that would represent the Royal Patent and the Land Commission Award to put it pala together, to have some standing, to submit it where it needs to go. Once it does, then the state of Hawaii has a pickle they gotta deal with. And the pickle is you. So I always say this, that we gotta start stepping up and taking responsibility for what was left behind for us. Don't just stop by looking at the name and what you tied into in the Kūkākūkūā petition. Take it further from there. So I get more for share, but I don't like to steal my mic.
No, mahalo nui. That actually segues us perfectly into our next question. So you folks are doing amazing jobs on Hawaii Island and Oahu. And I guess my next question is, how do we get in on it? How can we kako'o you from over here from Oahu to make sure that the leases aren't renewed in Pohakuloa and that we get to kick out the military when 2029 comes around? And Uncle, how do we, bring some of that Kuleana lands to Oahu, and how do we, start that fight here, or how do we support your fight there? I'll look at you if you want to start us off.
So I think the best thing that we can do as far as the Pohakuloa training area lease is to be maka'ala about who is put into position for governor, not this next election, but the election after, because that's going to dictate who's put into head of BLNR and DLNR, and they're going to make a decision on whether or not to renew or extend that 23,000 acre lease. The issue that I already also brought up is that the majority of the land that Pohakuloa is on is not a lease. It was purchased, and it was mostly from Parker Ranch, and that's all zoned as conservation land. And so the military is under obligation to perform an environmental impact statement, and they've performed cultural impact statements as well. And the summary of the cultural impact statement was that this is not healthy for the Native community, and they need to be consulted and they need to be granted access, much like the issues with Koho'olawe and Makua Valley. But how we all kako'oe is to pay attention to who's elected. And I'm never gonna tell you go vote, because we know that that's not reality. But if the person that's put into office for governor elects someone who is aloha aina for the head of DLNR to replace Don Chang currently, right? We pay attention to who's on the board. And if they're gonna make decisions that directly contradict what's healthy for our aina, then we write them letters, we bombard them, and make them make the right decision, because we can drag them publicly, and public shaming for that department works.
What's the Instagram that everyone should follow to keep updated?
Huliao Onavahikapu on Instagram, and I post on my personal Instagram, and that's kappa.nui, pretty consistently. So yeah, we're active, and we're can give you summary of DLNR's assessment of the draft environmental impact statement, and Uncle Ku and Auntie Max are kupuna that we source from, and we have their case, and we've all read through it, and I'm not gonna read the military's 400-page environmental impact statement because it's a joke, but this very, very accurately summarizes everything that was wrong with it. So if anybody wants a copy of this, come see me.
You know me, I'm a stickler when it comes to trusting the government. So I do think that, yeah, the solution is who are voted for people that are put into office. But then at the same time, you got to think about Josh Green too. Yeah, we thought he was going to be the wonderful governor for us, but did anybody check out his proclamation? Okay, so, and basically he was the one that actually appointed the new director for the LNR too. So my whole thing when it comes to remedying the situation is to find those heirs, find out the royal patent, who those royal patents belong to. Yeah, because if you talk to the military, they don't even want to touch the royal patents. So if we're looking at solutions and stuff like that, we got to figure out who these properties was basically controlled by during the time of the crown. Okay. I think that's where everything basically starts when you're talking about absolute title. The remedy is to start with the indices awards to quiet land titles in the Hawaiian Islands, in the Kingdom of Hawaii. That way you can get a little bit more information on where your kupuna was, to find out, you know, from the master lease that was provided for Mauna Kea, Hawaiian Homes, what they're doing within that area. How was Hawaiian Homes granted these properties, from who that transferred the properties over. It's all about validity when it comes to title, yeah, on who gave who what. Now, if there's heirs that actually can tie it to pohaku law, then I think that's a remedy. Might be kamamalu, might be, who knows. But that's what, for me, when I look into absolute title and when I look into making things pono, you really gotta know, yeah, basically who is the one that is responsible and has been responsible of that kuleana from the start. You know, I always wear this hat, 1833. Anybody know what the 1833 stand for? I mean, 1831. That's when Honolulu, west side, oldest school, west side of the Rockies. But that was before 1843. What was 1843? So in 1831, our ali'i was groomed, yeah, in Honolulu. There was only one school for ali'i. Okay, so they had to understand these kinds of things, because when came 1843, when the kanawai was put together, all these ali'is came together and advised our king on how we're going to look at how we're going to transfer interest to three parties: the government, the Konahiki, and the Makainama. I think that's the key, you know. Because when it comes to title, those three governing entities are the one that will solidify, yeah, on whether or not properties could be legally transferred. And if property was sold by a makainana, those properties can only be validated by a continual allowance from the Konahiki as well as the Crown. 33rd and a third interest. So every document I looked at on the transfer of title only had one signature, which means it's not a void. So when we talk about Public Law 103-150, that's an admittance by the President of the United States saying that the United States illegally overthrew the Kingdom of Hawaii. So what is the solution to that? If that is valid and that's a public law, then how do we rectify the wrongs that have been done in the past? Okay? So before we start trusting, yeah, into our elected officials, we gotta also remember now, maybe we get one back door, because if we don't have one back door, yeah, then we're gonna be stuck year after year after year after year when it comes to election. There was a big push, Office of Hawaiian Affairs. I'm Hawaiian and I vote. Hey, That's my kai. Get everybody to step up to the plate. But sometimes when you belong to the Big Five and you belong to these organizations that become a pack, yeah, they hit who first? Hawaiian states. The Kanaka vote. If they can convince the Kanaka vote to vote these people in, is it a good thing? So, when we talk about remedies, we gotta talk about those key elements, who those properties actually belong to, whether or not it was transferred, legally.
This next question is, and Uncle, you answered it a little bit in your previous question, but it's more personal than the rest. What's your folks' drivers for doing this, doing this organizer's work and researching all of this? Uncle, it sounds like you do extensive research. I mean, you've read, I don't even know what kind of documents to find out about Kūkākūkūā, but what drives you to do this work? And if you've thought about ways to then turn your driver into a driver for others and include more people into the movement, into your struggle, if you could speak to what your driver is and how you also then pull others in.
Okay. I got a lot of friends, and these friends, being involved in these like cultural renaissances and all these kinds of things, you meet retired judges. Yeah, one of them was a Supreme Court judge. I'm gonna drop his name. Tommy Kaulukukui. Okay. There's others. Chang. There's other judges out there that I kind of like picked their brains and told them about title and all these kinds of things. But when the appellate courts remanded decision to me back in 2006, I went to Tommy and I said, check it out. And he looked at it. Oh, okay, that's fine. Then later on, about 10 years later, I went back to him because I started doing more research. I put together one PowerPoint presentation. So periodically, we gotta go in front of this hui, and I don't think I can mention the name, but they're all made up of judges, attorneys, and all this kind of stuff. So they gave me one opportunity to present. I went in front of them, I did this one presentation. They said you get 20 minutes. So I did a presentation about title. After the presentation was done, they said, okay, go wait outside. Then they called me in about another half hour later, and they said, we like your presentation, and we're going to support you to send that virus out there. Wherever you go and do presentations, we're going to finance you. Now, when coming from somebody like that, especially the Supreme Court, I started thinking, wow, I guess my stuff work. It's a remedy in the right direction. So, from that time until today, we've been going to, we came to Oahu about 5 times. Waianae, went to Waimanalo, just to do the Power of the Affidavit workshop. Then from Oahu, we went to Kauai. Then we went to Maui. Then our last couple months ago, I think we went to Big Island where I met Sister. At Honolulu in Waimea and in Hilo at Kūkākūkūā. And meeting different people, especially the kupuna. You can see their expression on their face that there is hope. There is hope today. Because in order for us to have standings on the things that we do, and that's what we've been doing, that's what I've been doing, is just me and my Hawaiian go out there and we kind of make calls and network with everybody and see if everybody can provide us one place so we can do one workshop. And I offer this to all of you too. You get in touch with me, you guys like doing a workshop with your families, I'll jump on a plane, I'll come over here. I'll do whatever we need to do. And we include with this one stick, and it's a USB gigabyte, all the maps of the state of Hawaii, and not new maps, no, all the old maps, 1800s. Genealogy, 945 pages of the Kawawa genealogy. The affidavit that is within there, and it's in word form, so all you gotta do is fill in the blanks. We have a 29 booklet that it was what is that? Historical background of Kūkākūkūā, the rights of the native tenant. There's a list of things that the rights of the native tenant when you repatriate back to your aina, these amenities that are allowed to you because of Kūkākūkūā. And I think the most important thing, and that's a buy-in for a lot of families, because right now families are in dire need to protect that aina because of kupuna that lay to rest in that aina. So we include registration forms to register burials, to register historic properties. We also have the descendancy application. These kind of things, they valid because you put these things in, you go in front of the state says, okay, we recognize you as a cultural lineal descendant. Yeah, it more strengthens your tie to the property. And also a court document that helps you understand how to put these things together. It's a research 16 gigabyte hard drive. I brought some with me today, but not enough. But that's a start in the right direction, and going in front of these attorneys and judges from that point told me that we're doing things pono. We're doing things right. We're making an effort to make sure that when people get involved, step by step, they're going to understand the remedy on how they can tie themselves to the Vahipana once again. And we get some people in the audience that went that far, like, it's a great opportunity to hear that all of a sudden they went home, and that video on Facebook is just, it's hilarious when they say they're filming everything and they say, we're calling the cops and they're coming over now and you guys are going to get evicted. And it's like, it's beautiful to know that, hey, I'm not on your interest, we are on our undivided interest, right? So everything boils down to an undivided interest. Even though if you guys feel that, somewhere down the road that maybe your kupuna might have sold an interest, yeah, but which kupuna? Because if they had 4 brothers and sisters, one who can sell the interest of the others, especially if one make, wahala, they still have children. Now you get more people that have an undivided interest. One kupuna ahala, you get more people that have an undivided interest. So that's why I always tell everybody, no give up. But if you guys need kokua, yeah, come here, I'm there.
Sorry, she had to remind me of the question. So what has really driven me to get involved with Kūkākūkūā, besides direct traumatic experiences, is our water. We know that the U.S. military uses depleted uranium rounds in everything. And we know that they use white phosphorus in their training practices. There's UXO everywhere. There's archaeological sites. There's they are not supposed to do certain things because it affects the ope'opea, the bat. It will affect the ua'u, that's a migratory bird that's very highly endangered. So I guess a lot of my drive is our vai and our endangered species, or our native species, because those things will rely on each other, but they also feed us as Kanaka. If our species go extinct, then how do we continue the practices that our kupuna have carried for thousands of years? it's the same with our manu that are going extinct, right? With the akiki, those birds, those manu are gone, and practices that were associated with them are gone as well. Even though we may know what those practices look like, we cannot do that anymore. And our vibe is, if there's depleted uranium in the water, nobody's gonna live on that island in 75 years. They say it's gonna take 500 years for that water to percolate down and reach like actual taps, but they don't know what they're talking about. And they have such a long history of deception and lies that we know that that will happen a lot faster. And my Mokupuni won't be able to live on our Kuleana lands if there's no water. And I know the people of Oahu understand this in particular because of what's happening at Kūkākūkūā. So that's really the driving force. It's like future generations, they have to have water, and they have to have our po'e Hawaii, right?
Mahalo nui loa o lua for a great panel. What I've heard from you folks is that there is a sense of urgency to get land back, and there's a bunch of different ways that we can approach this and try and secure it. It's really awesome to see that you folks are doing this great work on Maui and on Hawaii Island. Mahalo nui loa. And for all of us in the audience, go follow the work that Alakai and Uncle Moku have been doing. And if you're interested in, sorry, I took notes. If you're interested in the Power of Affidavit workshops, make sure to hit up Uncle Moku. Follow Kahuliao Ona Vahikapu on Instagram, and also follow Hui Aloha Aina o Honolulu. We host things like this, trivia nights, and we're trying to get organized here on Oahu. And also follow Kale Maile Ali'i. Mahalo nui kako. That's the end of the Kūkākūkūā.
Mahalo Puna and mahalo to our panelists. I just want to note one thing too, is that Hui Aloha Aina across the Pai'aina, it is kind of special. We have 4 representations here. We have the Honolulu branch, Kale Aina, Ali'i, Lahaina, and Hilo. We are actually working across the Pai'aina to put on a one-day summit in October on the 2029 leases that are going. There's a bunch of military leases across the islands that are set to expire in 2029. So instead of waiting and just reacting to everything that they're doing to renew the leases, we're going to try and get all these camps of Ike in one room for one day in October to kind of understand the landscape, so we can start coalition building and building campaigns and being more proactive for that issue. And so Pohaku Loa is a big piece of that, and then we're organizing that as all branches across Hui Aloha Aina. So yeah, be on the lookout for that as well. That will be on Oahu. That's what was decided, and we have the support from Hawaii People's Fund to put together that one-day summit. So I just wanted to mention that too. Yeah. Ha'olila hoi hoi ya, everybody. That's a wrap.
Yeah.